Hello viewers, welcome to our program on immigration and legal affairs. I am your immigration attorney Michael Fulwani, and once again we have with us attorney David Nachman, my partner.
Thank you, Michael.
Before we start
Pleasure
the
to be
program,
back.
David has some announcement to make. David, go ahead.
Oh, yes. So I wanted to follow up with regard to the previous announcements that I've made, that I'll be going to India in November, early November actually, on the 8th or 9th. We'll be in New Delhi. We'll be in Chennai, Mumbai. Also, I'm planning a side trip to Ahmedabad, and be in Goa for a short time. I don't think there's much going on in Goa except beautiful beaches. And I would encourage anyone who would like me to meet with their friends, their family in India, would be more than happy to do that. So please feel free to email or to give a call to our office, and we can arrange to set up a meeting, schedule a meeting with anyone who might be interested in meeting with me. Or you can reach out for Michael at his telephone number, and Michael will coordinate with me. So we can do that at the Mumbai office in Bandra, which is right near the Kula complex, as many of our viewers are aware, or we can do it in any of the other cities where we'll be visiting. So thank you so much.
Have a nice trip.
Thank you, Michael.
And
I'm going
to tell viewers, anytime you want to reach David, give me a call. I'll coordinate and make appointment for you to see David in India.
Thank you so much. And in the past, Michael and I have traveled together to India. And this time I'll be traveling with 25 immigration lawyers as part of a delegation for the American Immigration Lawyers Association. And we'll be meeting with the consular officials in Mumbai, Chennai, and New Delhi, have an opportunity to socialize with them, and also have an opportunity to meet them in their offices and hear about the cutting edge news that's going on in the consulate. So I hope to be able to bring back some excellent information after my trip, and to be able to share that with all our viewers about what's going on with administrative processing, how to handle interviews, what's happening with the new DS-260 forms, and any other news that I'm able to bring back. We hope to be able to provide that information to you as rapidly as possible.
And while you are in India working hard, I'm going to be on a cruise enjoying and having fun.
So, and you should, Michael.
Absolutely.
Actually, for the amount of time that you've put in, you absolutely deserve to be doing that. And so I will have a lassi, a mango lassi for you while I'm there, and we'll be thinking of you, of course.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, let me say a few words in Hindi. तो हम बात कर रहे थे लास्ट प्रोग्राम के अंदर भी कि एक स्टूडेंट की जिसका सफ़र स्टूडेंट वीज़ा से शुरू होता है और अब अमेरिका में आता है स्टडी करने, फिर आगे बढ़ता है, ओपीटी करता है, H1B करता है, ग्रीन कार्ड करता है। ये सफ़र जो है स्टूडेंट वीज़ा से लेके ग्रीन कार्ड सिटीज़न बनने तक, उस बारे में हम बात कर रहे थे लास्ट प्रोग्राम के अंदर, और आज के प्रोग्राम में फिर कंटिन्यू करते हैं. तो वी आर गोइंग टू कंटिन्यू what we were talking about in the last program on students' journey to the green card.
Great.
So we almost finished about our student getting the student visa stamp on the passport, and he's coming now, getting in a plane, getting off at the Kennedy Airport, for example, and then he's going to face CBP official, Customs Border Protection. Now I know some of the times that at the window only they ask few questions and he's out. And there are other times where the student or any person is put in a secondary inspection. Can you talk about the processing that takes place at the port of entry or like a CBP?
Right. Well, Michael, obviously many of our viewers are aware of what it is to come into the United States at the port of entry. And some people don't realize there are Class A ports of entry, Class B, Class C. The Class A ports of entry, of course, are your major airports like Kennedy, Newark. And when you come in, you get routed through the passport control, and at that point you go to the kiosk, and the Customs and Border Protection, which is one of the sub-administrative agencies within the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, those officers are charged with sort of a checks and balances type of process, where what they do is check to make sure that the information that's been given before, which should of course already be in the database, is confirmed. So what they do is they'll say, well, what are you coming to the United States to do? So if they have an F1 stamp in their passport that they received at the consulate, then if they come and say, well, I'm coming to visit friends and family, bzz, they're going to get denied. Or if they
And
say,
then
I'm coming...
stamp has the name of the institution also.
Right, that's right. Or if they come in and say, we're coming to work, bzz, wrong. You're going to end up either getting turned away or you're going to get put into secondary inspection. So these are the problems. So, but if you say, well, I'm coming to study, and the information that they give is consistent with the information that's on the I-20 form and the SEVIS record and the visa stamp in the passport given by the U.S. Department of State, then the individual should comfortably pass through that kiosk and then move on, of course, to picking up their luggage.
Talking about secondary inspection, I know many of our viewers know about secondary inspection from
That's
few
right.
years ago, a trip of Shah Rukh Khan, the famous film actor that came in, and he spent about 2 hours in the secondary inspection. It does happen sometimes, not only in case of students, but even any kind of visas. If there are some questions, especially security clearance or something, then the officer who's sitting at the window cannot spend so much time.
That's right.
He's sent to another room where generally a supervisory officer is there.
Ask some
Who will
questions.
say, have a
right.
seat, sit
That's
down,
right.
and he'll go over all the details. He'll check the computer. He will try to clear that person up, and if everything's okay, then he can be admitted in the US.
Well, as Shah Rukh Khan said when he went to lecture at that Ivy League school after he was admitted, he said whenever he feels too full of himself, he always feels that it's a good idea to come to the United States because they bring him down a few rungs.
humbling
So if
experience.
any of our viewers are feeling too full of themselves, just sit back and think about that when you're in secondary inspection, that maybe you just need to be brought down a couple of rungs. But seriously, what it is that when you're in secondary inspection, what they're doing is they're just vetting the case a little bit more. They're making a further inquiry to see whether or not there are any issues. 9 times out of 10, a secondary inspection referral results in nothing other than, the person coming out of secondary inspection without any problems. But there could potentially be issues. So, for example, Michael and I have encountered issues where individuals who, for some reason, the name might be the same name as someone who's on the no-fly list. That might be a problem. Or there could be other problems.
Also, let's say one other question, before we just make the student enter the US, he's still either in India or arriving. How much time in advance of the starting of the school can the student enter the US? I believe it's probably 30 days or so.
Right. Well, the individual, it's 30 days.
Yeah.
That's right. Michael, I think we have to take a break. I'm just noticing, but as soon as we're done with the break, maybe we can come back and
Okay,
discuss
fine.
what the next step is after a student enters.
Very good. So let's take a short break, and right after the break, we'll continue further about the journey of these students from India to United States, from student visa to getting the green card. Stay tuned. We will be back. वेलकम बैक। बात कर रहे थे ब्रेक से पहले इस सफ़र की, इस स्टूडेंट की जो इंडिया से यहाँ पर आया, अमेरिका में पहुँच गया, वीज़ा मिल गई, नाउ ही इज़ अराइव्ड। नाउ वी टॉक अबाउट फर्दर व्हाट हैपेंस। लेट्स से एंड आस्क यू क्वेश्चन, दिस स्टूडेंट डजंट वांट टू गो टू स्कूल, ही जस्ट गॉट अ वीज़ा समहाउ, ही नाउ disappears.
Is it an F1 visa?
Yes, it disappears. That has happened. But
It's
not a
happened
joke.
many times.
It
We've
has.
seen it happen.
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Although much less after the CVIS than before used to be a lot. So now, what will you say? What can happen to him?
Well, now what happens is an automatic termination of the SEVIS record because the individual didn't go to class. And then what happens is that gets reported to ICE, and ICE goes out to find these people who are, I guess, where they're gone into the population. Now, this actually happened to a group of academics who had come from Egypt a couple of years back. And what happened was they entered to do some lecturing at an Ivy League school. They came in and they never made it to the Ivy League school to do their lecturing. And what happened was their SEVIS records were immediately terminated, and ICE went out and rounded them up. And what was really interesting about that is it tells you how the SEVIS system works, and that it does work. That so it's almost like what we have to let our viewers know is don't take any chances. If you really have a reason why you're not going to be able to make it to your classes, you have to communicate this immediately to your international student officer so that they're able to do what they need to do with the SEVIS records, because you don't want ICE showing up on your doorstep and putting you into a removal proceeding. That could be very bad.
So let's say that the student, if he's not attending the school, does the school authorities have the obligation to notify the government about the fact that the student has not joined?
They do. There's an affirmative obligation on the international student officers through the SEVIS program, which is part of the responsibilities of what's called an ISO, the International Student Officer. Now, many of our foreign students and viewers who are watching this program, they've been in contact with their international student officers, and they know exactly what the responsibilities are to the international student officers, and they know that the international student officers have certain responsibilities to the academic institution.
And that also happens, even let's say a student joins the school, after 3 months he dropped off. Still, even that act has to be notified to the concerned authorities, because he attended 3 months and disappeared.
Well, that's right. Well, the way it would work, Michael, is that, and we see a lot of individuals whose SEVIS records are terminated, and they're terminated for various reasons. We, for example, are handling a case right now in our office where we have an individual who was tending to her husband who was in a terrible car accident, and she was unable to attend her classes. And what happened was, as a result of her falling below the required number of classes, had her SEVIS record terminated. So we're working with her and with the USCIS to do a process called a reinstatement.
Correct.
So we're trying to reinstate their F1 visa so that there's no prejudice to the individual. Now, that is a wholly discretionary process, but we have to put forth our best efforts and best case for those individuals to ensure that they are not, that SEVIS record is not terminated, and that they end up in a removal
And
proceeding.
I think there's a time frame of 5 months within which the request for reinstatement has to be made.
That's correct, Michael. There is a timeline for reinstatement. That's right.
Okay, now let's go further about the student who doesn't want to run away, who doesn't want to drop legally. He wants to, he's not happy with this course. He wants
Okay.
to change. He wants to go to another school.
Okay.
Can he do it? How can he do it? What is the process?
Well, probably in that case, Michael, the best thing for a student to do is to go see their international student officer and to have that international student officer coordinate the transfer of the SEVIS file to the new academic institution, because then it's a nice clean break from one institution to the next. They get a new I-20, the SEVIS I-20 form for the new institution is issued, and they move over to the new academic institution. So those are fairly straightforward and easy cases. The cases that we've encountered are situations, unfortunately, where individuals are moving from one academic institution to the next, and they fail to coordinate it. And what happens is the SEVIS record would get terminated on one side before it gets reassigned to the new academic organization. So then what you're faced with is doing the reinstatement.
How does the CV system work in a transfer? When they get a new I-20, probably
That's
that
right.
information is entered. And the existing school also makes some kind of notation on the existing I-20 about the transfer.
That's right, and probably the most important thing, and Michael, you know this as well as we do, is that the key is that you have to put the two academic institutions in touch with each other so they can coordinate their efforts so that the SEVIS record is not terminated. Again, the termination of the SEVIS record is the bad thing that can happen here.
David, I recall something in the past which probably is not happening now. Some F1 students applied for H1 visa. H1 visa job starting October 1st, but it is approved much earlier. And I remember very clearly that on some of the cases, CVs kind of terminated because they went into the H, but they should not have terminated because he still continues to be F1 until he starts working. But now a lot of complaints were there, and our recollection is that problem was resolved. But people got scared, you know. They are going to school. They only applied for H1, and then the ICE comes after them. The ICE doesn't understand. As long as he is out, they immediately come, and then of course they see what happened. And
right, it's a great point, Michael, because historically what happened was, I don't know, there's a history behind SEVIS. SEVIS was not always called SEVIS, it was called SEVP, and it came on as a pilot program just after 9/11, and they were trying to work out all of the kinks in that database. And so we don't have as many problems as we used to. And there also is there's something called the SEVIS Help Desk. So if you have any issues, you can go to them and you can work with the SEVIS Help Desk. But there are always situations that come up. And we work very closely with academic institutions and their international student officers to help the students who are in those academic institutions to deal with some of these glitches and some of these issues.
There are the students who are going to school, fine, he's complying with the law, he's maintaining his status, he needs some money. And I believe there are several ways that a student can work in the United States.
That's right.
Part-time, maybe on the school or on OPT, CPT.
That's right.
Explain about different ways on which the student can work in the United States, whether on campus or off campus.
Okay, so I'm going to just give you a quick overview of the ways in which a student can work. First of all, students are allowed to work 20 hours a week on campus with authorization from their international student officer. And the way that that's done is that an annotation is made to their I-20 form, and they can use that to get their employment authorization. So remember that people who are working in the United States are required to have documentation to prove their ability to work, which is called employment authorization. So the annotation to the I-20 form for the 20 hours a week on campus gives them that ability. Also, those people who are working 20 hours a week are allowed to work full-time during vacations and during the summer. So that's a really nice little kicker. The second way in which students can work is what's called CPT. So CPT allows a student to work in what's called like an internship.
Right.
And the same idea is that the International Student Officer, ISO, gives them an annotation to their I-20, their SEVIS I-20, and then what they're able to do is work, and that's either on campus or off campus, but it's essentially an internship. The third way in which an individual is allowed to work is what's called OPT, Optional Practical Training. And we call that the honeymoon period because that's usually the time in which an individual is allowed to go work off campus for an employer who usually also is the employer for whom they will have an H-1B. So that's the honeymoon period where the employer gets to decide whether or not they want to do the H-1B. So we help students, for example, at that point in time, our offices would interface with an employer who, let's say, is employing an OPT individual and help them to understand what discussion they need to have with an employer in order to make that H-1B happen for them. Now, in addition to that, there's also something called the STEM OPT, which OPT ordinarily...
You're talking about duration.
Well, the duration, right. The duration of OPT is 12 months. So they work for 1 full year following their graduation in their field of academic study.
And STEM is a longer period.
And STEM, right, STEM gives them an extension of that, so they get an additional 17-month extension off the 12. So it gives them a total of 29 months of work authorization as long as they're in the field of, so they get that additional 17 months if they've studied in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, and also that the employer that they're going to work for has registered in a special program called E-Verify, which is an electronic methodology of doing this employment authorization. Now also, I just want to mention people who do OPT and who do STEM OPTs get what's called an employment authorization document, which is made on a form I-765, which needs to be filed.
EAD requires a very important thing, that they must start working in 3 months period. If they don't do that, then that OPT can expire.
Right. Well, there is a period of time in which they have to start their work, but they have to apply 90 days prior to the work. So, and that gives them, there's usually a 90-day period of time in which it takes the USCIS to get them the EAD, which is, again, the I-765 form. So if you're working closely, if you're listening to this show and you're wondering when is it time to talk to your international student officer, 90 days prior to your your date that you graduate is a good time to be talking to your ISO about getting that EAD.
And some cases where the EAD is extendable, renewed, that they should really also apply 90 days in advance, because I just recently a case where EAD is expiring the next 1 week, he never applied for extension. He's going to apply for extension, but he must stop working and wait until the EAD is again.
That's correct.
renewable.
That's correct,
So all these
Michael.
steps, they have to follow, they have to maintain. Bottom line is they must
Maintain
maintain
their
status all the
status.
time
Very
for all
important.
practical purposes.
Absolutely.
All practical purposes, not only for CVS, but changing from student to H1 or H1 to green card. At all stages of this journey, the
That's
process,
right.
suffer,
Exactly.
we say journey,
Yeah.
must maintain the legal status.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. So then, of course, after an individual has their OPT, let's say for the 12 months, let's not even go into STEM, but the hope is that after the 12 months, they will bridge that gap over April 1st to be able to apply for the H-1B. And that would be the next step in the process is
But
the
at
H-1B.
this time, we need to take a short break, and right after the break, we'll continue further. I know this takes a long time to explain all these things, but it's
Well, it's quite a journey. That's
the journey
right.
is long.
A journey's
so
a
you
journey.
have to go step by
That's right.
step by step. You know.
That's right. If it
You're
were a
flying
quick
from-
trip, it would be a quick trip. It's not.
Exactly,
It's a
exactly.
journey.
So
Right.
stay tuned. We will be back and continue the journey further. Welcome back. Let's continue our journey of the student to the green card. We have reached up to the stage where the student took a flight from India, got the visa stamp, he arrived in the US, he's going to school, and also we talked about the transfers from program one to another. We did talk about whether students and how they can work in the United States, getting an EAD, keeping themselves in maintenance all the time. So one other question that comes to my mind is a student who came on a visitor visa, for example, and he changed the status to F1, and he's legally here for the last 2-3 years, going to school and all that. Now he wants to go home for a vacation, but that stamp on the passport has expired. He is in his status as per I-94. He is in a valid status because generally students are giving DS, the duration of studies,
Duration of status.
so that
Yep.
doesn't expire in a way. But he's worried. If I go to India, meet my parents, and I have to go to the American consulate for the new F1 stamp. Should I expect any problems? Is it simple and easy? Just go and, okay, give me the stamp?
Well, I think that in all cases, and I think you would agree with me, Michael, it depends upon where the person is in their studies. If they're toward the very end of their studies and they're on their EAD and they're in their OPT period, generally the academic institutions have guidance from USCIS, and they provide it to their students, and that is that it's best not to travel if they don't have to. Why take the chance? But many students have to. For example, they have a sick relative. Our
Death
recommendation.
of a family member. Death of a family
Yeah,
member
of course,
sometimes.
of course. And so obviously if you have that type of documentation, then you can take that documentation with you, you can go to the US consulate and you get a new visa stamp, and then you can re-enter the United States. But you have to remember that that visa stamp, when you get it, may be curtailed in terms of the time that you're going to get it for.
See, there are two types of applicants we are talking about. Somebody came on a visitor visa, changed to F1 in the US. Consuls don't like that, because consul think that you misused your visitor visa. You
Right,
must.
that you're trying to short circuit the system in
No,
some way.
No,
Yeah.
but
you're not.
I'm not saying they deny all of those, but they look into those factors.
Of course.
What were you doing in India before you leaving India? The guy was working someplace and he resigned. He wiped up everything and settled.
Sounds like a potential 221G.
Exactly. No, basically, that shows a preconceived intent that he cut off all his ties and he's packing the suitcases, everything, and coming here to stay long term.
Exactly.
And maybe a student visa in his mind. I go to US and then I'll apply for a student visa. So those are very risky, more risky than those who already the first stamp F1 they got from the American consulate. But even then, as you said, that he got a proper visa stamp F1 from the consulate, he came, entered as F1, he continued whatever studies and everything, he's maintaining the status, he's now in OPT. Now, I've seen consuls saying, Mr. Patel, you said you want to do MBA, and we gave you the visa, you finished your MBA. Now we saw that you almost completed your OPT, only 2 more months left. So what's the point? You're done,
Right.
your mission is accomplished. There's no need for you to go back again, sorry. Now that is risky. So what you were saying earlier, the international students advise them also the same thing, that you don't go if you don't really have to go.
That's right.
And me and David will say the same thing. Unless it is an important thing that you have to risk that thing. The better idea is that I am sure that at that point, at that stage, you are already planning to shift from your F1 to H1B.
Right.
Now, once you get H1B, you go. You don't have to worry
Right.
much about
And
that
you have
because
dual intent,
there's no
so it's not.
214B
Yeah, exactly.
issue is not there.
Exactly, because dual intent.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, Michael, you've brought up a really good point, which I just want to come back to, if you don't mind, and that is
Sure,
that
sure.
the visa or the status that's given to an individual when they enter the United States with an F1, it'll say on their I-94, and these are the electronic I-94s now, remember, it's going to say DS. DS means duration of status. So what does that mean? What that means essentially is, as long as you're maintaining your status and you're in your academic program and maintaining the appropriate number of credits to allow you to be in a full-time course of study, you will be allowed to stay in the United States. So there might be certain, so what good is that? What's the power of that? The power is that you won't accrue unlawful presence, which means that you won't become subject to the 3 and the 10-year bar. However, if you have a technical violation to your F1 or M or J visa, then you will start to accrue this unlawful presence. So how can you get one of those technical violations? Well, as we said before, if you fall out of SEVIS, that would be one of those violations that would make you possibly subject to the 3 or the 10-year bar. So you have to be a little careful with that. But there is power in being DS, because under the rules, under the regulations, there's no accrual of unlawful presence in DS status.
Very good, very good. And the last word I want to say is that DS are not subject to unlawful presence. So student completed his studies, OPT, everything, is still looking for an H1 employer. 3-4 months go by, and then he goes back to India to get a stamp because he cannot change the status. It's not a big problem like unlawful presence. He can always say, I was working on trying to find an employer, but
Right.
unlawful presence wouldn't apply, so he wouldn't have a serious problem.
Right.
We can talk still a lot more, but actually we are running out of time. We're at the end of the program.
Always.
I know that our viewers got very, very good information in our last 2-3
Excellent
programs.
information.
And always we'll try to bring the latest, more important information that really touches your heart, that affects you personally.
And cheaper than a consultation with us, that's for sure, right?
Okay, David, okay. And thank you very much for watching the program, and goodbye.
Bye now.